Your chest feels tight. There's a strange sensation in your left arm. You Google your symptoms, and within 30 seconds, you're convinced it's a heart attack, or maybe something worse. But here's the strange part. You're sitting perfectly still, your heart is fine, and the only thing that's actually dangerous is the spiral you've just fallen into. This is health anxiety, and it turns out your brain is exceptionally good at convincing you that you're dying even when you're perfectly healthy. We've all been there. A headache becomes a brain tumor, a mole becomes melanoma, that weird twitch in your eyelid, obviously a neurological disorder. Most people have these thoughts, brush them off, and move on. But for millions of people, these thoughts spiral into something far more consuming, a condition once called hypochondria, now known clinically as illness anxiety disorder. And understanding why your brain does this isn't just interesting psychology. It might actually help you break the cycle. So what exactly is health anxiety? At its core, it's a preoccupation with having or acquiring a serious illness, despite having little or no medical evidence to support that belief. Notice I said preoccupation, not delusion. People with health anxiety aren't hallucinating symptoms. They're usually hyper-aware of their bodies, sometimes painfully so. Every sensation gets magnified, analyzed, and catastrophized. A normal stomach gurgle becomes cancer. A bruise you don't remember getting becomes a blood disorder. The anxiety itself creates real physical symptoms, racing heart, sweating, dizziness, which then become proof that something is wrong. It's a self-reinforcing loop. Now, you might be thinking, but what if they're right? This is one of the most insidious aspects of health anxiety, because sometimes people do have real illnesses. And the brain clings to these "I told you so" moments as evidence that vigilance is necessary. But here's the reality: health anxiety doesn't protect you. In fact, it often puts you at greater risk. People with severe health anxiety often avoid doctors entirely, fearing bad news. Or they become such frequent visitors that doctors start dismissing their concerns, including the legitimate ones. The fear of illness can actually interfere with getting proper care. To understand why health anxiety happens, we need to look at how your brain processes information. Your brain is fundamentally a prediction machine, constantly taking in sensory data and comparing it to what it expects to find. Most of the time, this happens below your conscious awareness. You don't notice your heartbeat unless something changes. This is called sensory attenuation. Your brain filters out predictable, non-threatening information so you can focus on what matters. But in health anxiety, this filtering system goes haywire. The brain starts flagging normal bodily sensations as potentially significant. Research suggests it often begins with what psychologists call an inciting event. Maybe you had a genuine health scare. Maybe someone close to you got sick or died unexpectedly. Or maybe you just spent too much time down a WebMD rabbit hole during a stressful period. Whatever the trigger, your brain learns a powerful lesson. Bodies are unpredictable, and danger can come from inside. Once this lesson takes hold, your brain goes into protection mode. This is where the nocebo effect comes in. You've probably heard of the placebo effect. Believing a treatment will work can produce real improvements. The nocebo effect is its evil twin. If you believe something will cause harm, your body can produce real symptoms in response. Studies have shown that people told a sham treatment will cause side effects often experience those exact side effects. In health anxiety, this effect runs on overdrive. You read about a disease, and suddenly you notice matching symptoms. Your brain, expecting danger, helps create the evidence it's looking for. Let's talk about the role of the internet. The term cyberchondria emerged in the early 2000s to describe how online searching fuels health anxiety. A study by Microsoft Research found that web search engines escalate minor concerns into serious ones. Search for headache, and the top results often include brain tumor and aneurysm, not because those are likely, but because they're dramatic and clickable. Algorithms prioritize engagement over accuracy, and nothing engages like fear. What starts as a simple question can turn into hours of spiraling through worst-case scenarios. But here's where it gets really interesting. Health anxiety isn't just about fear of illness. At a deeper level, researchers believe it's often about control, or rather, the lack of it. The one thing we cannot control is our own mortality. For most people, this knowledge stays quietly in the background. But for those with health anxiety, it moves to the foreground. Every sensation becomes a potential harbinger of death. The checking, the Googling, the reassurance seeking, these are all attempts to gain control over something fundamentally uncontrollable. Psychologists have identified several thinking patterns that keep health anxiety alive. One is catastrophic interpretation, assuming the worst possible explanation for any symptom. Another is intolerance of uncertainty, the inability to accept that you can't know for certain whether you're healthy. There's also attentional bias, where your brain becomes a heat-seeking missile for bodily sensations. And perhaps most frustrating is safety behavior, checking your pulse constantly, seeking repeated medical tests, or asking for reassurance. These behaviors feel helpful, but they actually prevent the brain from learning that the feared outcome isn't happening. So who's most at risk? Research shows it can affect anyone, but certain factors increase vulnerability. If you grew up with a parent overly concerned about health, you may have learned to view your body as fragile. If you experienced a serious illness as a child, that early trauma can leave a lasting imprint. People with other anxiety disorders, depression, or OCD are also more likely to develop health anxiety. Interestingly, medical students often experience a temporary form during their training. They learn about so many diseases that they start seeing symptoms everywhere. It's called medical student syndrome. Now for something that might surprise you. Despite the suffering it causes, health anxiety was only recognized as a distinct diagnosis relatively recently. For centuries, it was lumped under hypochondria, a term dating back to ancient Greece. The word became associated with neurotic health complaints, but it also carried a connotation of fakery or attention-seeking. This stigma prevented many people from seeking help. In 2013, the diagnostic manual replaced hypochondria with two separate conditions: illness anxiety disorder, where health fears dominate without physical symptoms, and somatic symptom disorder, where anxiety focuses on actual physical issues. The change acknowledged that health anxiety is a real and treatable condition, not a character flaw. Speaking of treatment, there is good news. Health anxiety responds well to cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. The core idea is to identify and challenge the distorted thoughts driving the anxiety while gradually reducing safety behaviors. Instead of Googling symptoms, you learn to sit with uncertainty. Instead of checking your body, you practice redirecting attention outward. Research shows this can be remarkably effective in some cases, more effective than medication. There are also newer approaches drawing on mindfulness and acceptance. These don't try to eliminate anxious thoughts, but rather change your relationship to them. The goal is to notice a scary thought and let it pass without engaging with it. Some people find this more sustainable than trying to argue with their anxious brain. You can't reason with an emotion, but you can choose not to let it drive the car. If you're watching this and recognizing yourself, there are practical steps you can take. First, consider limiting exposure to health information. Be intentional about when and how you consume medical content. Second, notice when you're engaging in safety behaviors, the checking, the reassurance seeking, the late-night symptom searches. Each time you resist the urge, you're teaching your brain a new lesson. Third, practice tolerating uncertainty. You can learn to accept that you'll never have 100% certainty about your health and that this is okay. It's worth noting that health anxiety exists on a spectrum. Almost everyone experiences it occasionally. The question isn't whether you ever worry about your health, but whether that worry is interfering with your life. If you find yourself spending hours each day preoccupied with illness, avoiding activities you enjoy, or constantly seeking medical reassurance, it might be time to talk to a professional. Let's step back and look at the bigger picture. Health anxiety, at its core, is a misunderstanding between you and your brain. Your brain thinks it's protecting you. It's like an overzealous security system that goes off every time a leaf blows past the window. The alarm feels real, but the threat isn't there. Understanding this doesn't make the alarm stop ringing, but it gives you a choice about how to respond. So the next time you feel that familiar tightness in your chest, or notice a strange sensation that sends your mind racing, remember this: your brain is trying to help, but it doesn't always know what it's talking about. Bodies are weird. They make noises, they twitch, they ache, and most of the time, it means absolutely nothing. The goal isn't to never worry about your health. The goal is to recognize when worry has stopped being useful and started being the problem itself. And if you can do that even a little bit, you might find that the fear loses some of its power, not because you've conquered mortality, but because you've made peace with uncertainty.